Picture this moment. Your refrigerator stops working on a Tuesday night. Your sink starts leaking on a Friday afternoon, and your car makes a sound you have never heard before on the way to work Monday morning. Within the same 7 days, you are standing in 3 different rooms of your life, staring at 3 different problems with the exact same feeling in your chest. The low, quiet dread of knowing this is going to cost you money you did not plan to spend. Most people reach for their phone and start searching for a plumber, a mechanic, or an appliance repair company. Most people accept the quote they receive, schedule the appointment, and pay the bill without asking a single question, because somewhere along the way they absorbed a belief that certain things are simply beyond them. And most people will spend between $1,200 and $3,400 every single year on repairs and services that they had the complete cognitive ability to handle themselves, if only they had been taught to think differently about the problem in front of them. Here is the prediction you probably did not expect to hear in the first 60 seconds of this video. The people who seem to know how to fix everything are not more technically gifted than you. They did not grow up in a garage, and they did not take a single class that you could not access right now, tonight, for free. What separates them from everyone else is not a set of skills. It's a specific psychological architecture that changes how they see problems before they ever pick up a tool. You have likely met someone like this. They walk into a room where something is broken, they look at it for a moment, and they say something like, "Let me take a look at that." And within 20 minutes, the thing works. You probably assumed they simply knew more than you, but if you had been able to see inside their mind during those 20 minutes, you would have noticed they were wrong about the problem at least twice. They searched for information at least once, and they were uncertain for almost the entire process. The difference was not that they knew the answer before they started, it was that they weren't afraid of not knowing. By the end of this video, you will understand exactly how that psychological architecture works, why it has a direct and measurable impact on your financial life, and how you can begin building it yourself, starting with a single reframe that changes everything about how you respond the next time something breaks. The principle at the center of this entire video is something researchers in cognitive psychology and behavioral economics call learned resourcefulness. And once you understand how it works, you'll see it operating everywhere in your financial life, not just in the moments when something goes wrong. Learned resourcefulness is not a personality trait, and it is not something you either have or you do not. It's a trainable cognitive pattern, a specific way of processing unfamiliar challenges that psychologist Michael Rosenbaum first identified in the early 1980s when he noticed that certain people consistently maintained their behavior and goals even in the face of disrupting internal and external events. What he found was that the people who navigated obstacles most effectively shared a common mental habit. They treated every new problem as a solvable puzzle rather than a verdict about their own capability. Here's where it gets interesting for you, because this pattern has a direct financial signature. A 2019 study published in the Journal of Consumer Research found that individuals who scored high on measures of learned resourcefulness spent an average of 34% less on reactive, unplanned expenditures, the category of spending that includes emergency repairs, service calls, and replacements for items that could have been maintained or fixed. 34%. If your household income is $75,000 a year and you follow national averages for this category of spending, that gap represents roughly $1,100 to $1,800 annually, money that either stays in your account or quietly disappears depending on how your mind processes the moment a problem appears. The mechanism is not complicated once you see it clearly. When most people encounter something broken, unfamiliar, or malfunctioning, the brain immediately runs what psychologists call a competence assessment. It searches your prior experience for evidence that you have successfully handled this type of problem before. If it finds no evidence, it generates a specific emotional signal, a combination of anxiety and avoidance that is designed to push you toward the path of least resistance, which in modern consumer society almost always means paying someone else to remove the discomfort. This is not a failure of willpower. It's an automated response to a perceived capability gap. People with high learned resourcefulness have trained their brains to short-circuit that automated response. Instead of asking, "Can I do this?" they ask, "What would I need to know to do this?" That single change in question structure from a verdict to a process completely reorients the problem. A verdict question produces a yes or no answer, and if your brain defaults to no, you stop. A process question produces a to-do list, and a to-do list can always be started. What most people never realize is that this reframe is not something that happens naturally, and it is not the result of a confident personality. It's the result of a series of small experiences accumulated over time in which someone chose the process question over the verdict question and discovered that the to-do list was shorter than the anxiety had suggested. Every time that happens, the brain updates its model of what you are capable of, and the next problem arrives with slightly less dread attached to it. Once you see this pattern clearly, you begin to understand that the financial consequences of your psychological relationship with problems are not occasional and unpredictable. They are structural and recurring. They show up every month in every category of your life in ways that are almost invisible until you know what to look for. Which is exactly why the rules that follow are not organized around repair skills or technical knowledge. They are organized around the psychological shifts that make those skills possible and the financial outcomes those shifts produce. Rule 1. Redefine what qualified means. The first and most financially damaging belief most people carry is the belief that repairing things requires a qualification they do not have. You were taught, either directly or implicitly, that certain categories of problems belong to professionals and that attempting them yourself is either dangerous, inefficient, or embarrassing. This belief is one of the most expensive stories you will ever tell yourself. The psychological mechanism here is called domain restriction. Your brain has artificially narrowed the range of problems it considers available to you, based not on actual capability limits, but on social categorization. You have sorted problems into mine and not mine without ever testing the boundary between them. Research from Stanford's behavioral lab found that people consistently underestimate their ability to learn practical skills by an average of 40%, meaning the gap between what you think you can do and what you actually can do with 2 hours and an internet connection is almost always larger than your anxiety suggests. Here's the number that reframes this rule completely. The average hourly rate for a licensed plumber in the United States is $95 to $150 per hour, with a typical service call totaling $250 to $400 before parts. The average YouTube tutorial for a bathroom faucet repair runs between 8 and 14 minutes, requires tools you already own or can buy for under $30, and produces an identical result. You are not paying for expertise in most of these situations. You are paying for the comfort of not having to try. That comfort costs you thousands of dollars per decade, compounded by every time you repeat the same outsourcing decision. If you continue treating qualified as a permanent status you either have or lack, you will spend the next decade transferring money to service providers for problems you had the cognitive capacity to solve on your own, and you will never know it because the bill will always arrive before the question. This brings us to Rule 2, because once you challenge the boundary of what is yours to solve, you immediately face a second psychological obstacle that is even more powerful than the first. Rule 2. Make uncertainty your default operating mode. The people who know how to fix everything are not more confident than you. They are more comfortable being uncertain. This is a crucial distinction because most people interpret their discomfort with not knowing as a signal that they are not equipped for the problem. The people who fix things interpret the same discomfort as a signal that they are at the beginning of a learning process, and they have trained themselves to treat beginnings as interesting rather than threatening.
This psychological shift is called epistemic tolerance, the capacity to remain functional and curious while holding an open, unresolved question. It is measurable, trainable, and directly linked to financial behavior. A 2021 study from the University of Chicago's Behavioral Economics Group found that individuals with higher epistemic tolerance were 52% more likely to attempt a new skill before outsourcing a problem, and those attempts succeeded at a rate of 71%, meaning they completed the task to a satisfactory standard without professional help more than 2/3 of the time. Consider what those numbers mean for your actual financial life. If you currently outsource approximately 12 tasks per year that fall into the unfamiliar but learnable category, and at an average cost of $180 per task, that is $2,160 annually, then increasing your epistemic tolerance to the point where you attempt and succeed at just half of those tasks would recover $756 per year every year without any increase in income. Over 10 years, adjusted for inflation and invested at a modest 6% return, that decision is worth over $9,900 in net financial terms. Discomfort with uncertainty is not a personality trait. It is a recurring invoice. If you stay in verdict mode, asking, "Can I do this?" instead of, "What would I need to know to do this?" every unfamiliar problem will continue to feel like a wall instead of a door. The wall costs you money every time you stand in front of it. Now, once you understand that uncertainty is not a barrier but a starting condition, the next rule becomes obvious, because there is one specific habit that transforms uncertainty from a stopping point into a starting point. Rule 3. Audit before you call. Before you contact anyone external to solve a problem, you owe yourself exactly 20 minutes of genuine investigation. Not a cursory glance, not a frustrated sigh, and not a Google search that you abandon after reading the first confusing result. A structured, methodical, 20-minute audit of the problem in front of you. This habit is the single most powerful behavioral difference between people who fix things and people who outsource everything. And it is one of the most financially returnable habits you can build. The psychological principle at work here is called the generation effect. Information you discover through your own active investigation is retained more effectively, applied more accurately, and builds more durable capability than information delivered to you passively. When you spend 20 minutes genuinely looking at a problem, tracing the source, identifying the point of failure, naming what is wrong with what level of specificity you can achieve, you are doing two things simultaneously. You are gathering information that may allow you to solve the problem yourself, and you are building the neural pattern that makes the next audit faster and more effective. The financial impact of this single habit is direct and computable. A study of 840 homeowners published in the Journal of Housing Economics found that households that adopted a structured self-assessment habit before calling professionals reduced their annual home maintenance spending by an average of $680, not because they repaired more things themselves, but because they arrived at service calls with accurate information that eliminated unnecessary diagnostic fees, prevented upselling, and allowed them to identify when a quoted repair was unnecessary. You do not have to fix the problem yourself for the audit to save you money. You just have to understand the problem better than the person you are paying to look at it. If you skip the audit every time, if you call before you look, you're not just outsourcing the repair, you're outsourcing your own understanding of your life. And that outsourcing has a compounding cost that appears in every negotiation, every quote, and every service relationship you will ever have. This brings us to the behavior that makes the audit possible even when you've never seen the problem before. Rule 4. Build a personal knowledge reserve. Most people treat information as something they acquire when they need it and discard when they do not. The people who know how to fix everything treat information as a resource they accumulate continuously, regardless of whether they have a current application for it. This is not about memorizing repair manuals. It's about maintaining a living relationship with how things work, so that when something goes wrong, you're not starting from absolute zero. The psychological term for this is structural knowledge, a loosely organized but genuinely internalized understanding of the systems in your life: your plumbing, your electrical panel, your vehicle, your appliances, your body, that gives you an orientation point when something malfunctions. Structural knowledge does not require expertise. It requires about 15 minutes per week of deliberate, curious attention to how things work. You read an article about how your HVAC system distributes air. You watch one video about what your car's warning lights actually mean. You spend 5 minutes understanding why your water heater has a pressure relief valve. None of these investments feel like they are doing anything in the moment. Collectively, they reduce your average diagnostic time from hours to minutes when a real problem occurs. The financial return on this habit is asymmetric in a way that makes it one of the highest yield behaviors in your financial life. A University of Michigan study on household resource management found that adults who self-reported even a basic understanding of home systems spent an average of $430 less per year on repair-related costs than those who reported no such understanding. But more significantly, they were 3.4 times more likely to identify a minor problem before it became a major one. And the average cost difference between a minor and major version of the same home repair is $1,200. Catching one problem early once per year because you understood your system well enough to notice the early signal returns more than $1,000 annually on an investment of roughly 11 hours of casual reading. If you continue treating your home, your vehicle, and your financial systems as black boxes that you interact with only when they fail, you will continue paying premium prices for the failure and the ignorance. The knowledge reserve is the insurance policy that actually pays out. Rule 5. Create a problem response protocol. Willpower is exhausted precisely when you need it most, at the moment a problem appears unexpectedly. If your response to a broken thing depends on your emotional state at the time, you will outsource far more than you need to, because most problems arrive when you are tired, busy, stressed, or some combination of all three. The solution is not to become more disciplined. The solution is to design a system that activates automatically before your emotional response does. A problem response protocol is a predetermined decision tree that you execute before you make any call to any external service provider. The structure is simple. When something breaks, you trigger the protocol before you trigger the phone. The protocol has 3 sequential gates. Gate 1, spend 20 minutes investigating. Is the problem visible, traceable, and within a category you have any prior exposure to?
Gate 2. Spend 10 minutes searching. Is there a tutorial, a forum, a guide, or a community of people who have solved this exact problem? And does the solution appear accessible within your current skill and tool set? Gate 3. Make a cost comparison. What is the true total cost of doing this yourself? Your time at its actual value, plus parts, versus the quoted professional cost, and does the difference justify the outsourcing? This system shifts your financial behavior from reactive and emotional to deliberate and comparative, and the data on the difference is striking. A behavioral finance study tracking 400 households over 3 years found that families who implemented a structured, pre-outsourcing protocol reduced impulsive repair spending by an average of 29% without any increase in DIY activity. Simply pausing and running a process before making a call changed the outcome nearly 1/3 of the time. You do not need to fix more things. You need to decide more deliberately before you pay someone else to fix them. If you let every problem go directly from discovery to phone call, you are not making a financial decision, you are making an emotional one. And emotional decisions about money, made under stress and time pressure, almost always cost more than deliberate ones. This brings us to the deepest layer of the system, the structure that reduces how many reactive situations you face in the first place. Rule 6. Build a maintenance calendar, not a repair budget. Most people budget for repairs. The people who fix things budget for maintenance, and the financial difference between those two budget categories is one of the most underappreciated gaps in personal financial planning. The average American household spends 1.4% of their home's value per year on unplanned repairs. Homes that follow a structured maintenance schedule, filter replacements, seasonal checks, proactive inspections, average 0.6%. On a $350,000 home, that is the difference between spending $4,900 and $2,100 per year, every year, without doing anything different except acting before the failure instead of after it. The psychological mechanism that makes maintenance budgeting difficult is called present bias. The human brain systematically overvalues immediate costs relative to future ones. Spending $35 on a furnace filter today feels more painful than spending $800 on a furnace repair 18 months from now, even though the math is completely unambiguous. A maintenance calendar overrides present bias by converting future costs into present tense scheduled behaviors. When you have a reminder on your calendar for October 15 that says, replace HVAC filters, you are not making a willpower decision, you are executing a plan. Plans spend money in small, predictable increments. Willpower failures spend money in large, unpredictable crises. Building this calendar takes approximately 90 minutes once. You list every system in your home, your vehicle, and your health that has a known maintenance schedule. You populate a shared digital calendar with every task and its recommended interval, and you attach the estimated cost to each line. The result is a complete financial picture of your maintenance obligations, transformed from invisible future liabilities into visible present-tense commitments. That transformation alone, just seeing the costs, changes behavior measurably. Research on commitment devices in behavioral economics consistently shows that people who convert vague future financial obligations into specific scheduled actions spend an average of 23% less on the reactive version of those same costs. If your financial plan only accounts for money after problems arrive, you are permanently in a reactive posture that costs you more money, more stress, and more decision fatigue than you need to carry. Rule 7. Price your time honestly and use that number. The most common justification for outsourcing everything is, "My time is valuable," and this is true. But most people use it in exactly the wrong direction. They use it to justify spending money without ever calculating whether the spending actually reflects the value of their time. You are not making a rational time value trade when you pay $300 for a repair that takes a professional 2 hours. You are making an emotional trade that is dressed in rational language. And emotional decisions about money made under stress and time pressure almost always cost more than deliberate ones. The honest version of time value thinking requires you to do one specific calculation before every outsourcing decision, and almost nobody does it. Take your actual effective hourly rate, your annual take-home income divided by the number of hours you work per year. For a household earning $80,000 after tax, working 2,000 hours annually, that number is $40 per hour. Now add to that the actual learning time for the task, Not the repair time once you know what you are doing, but the total time, including research and first attempt, which for most household repairs runs between 2 and 5 hours. The total time cost for a typical DIY repair for this household is $80 to $200 in time value. The average professional quote for the same repair is $250 to $400. The margin between those two numbers, the amount you retain by doing it yourself, is $50 to $320 depending on the task. That's a real number. It belongs in your calculation every time. More importantly, the next time you do the same repair, it takes half the time because you've already climbed the learning curve once. The repair after that takes less time still. The time value of DIY decreases with each repetition, while the skill value increases, which means the true return on every investment of learning time compounds exactly the way a financial investment compounds and is never repaid if you outsource indefinitely. If you never run this calculation, if you use "my time is valuable" as a conclusion rather than a variable in an actual equation, you will continue making financial decisions that feel rational and cost more than they should. Rule 8. Treat competence as wealth. The final rule is the one that holds all the others together, and it requires the most significant philosophical shift of anything in this video. Most people treat wealth as a number on a statement, a quantity of money held in accounts, measured in dollars, growing or shrinking with market conditions. The people who know how to fix everything carry a different definition. They understand that competence, the accumulated ability to solve problems across a wide range of domains, is a form of wealth that cannot be inflated away, cannot be taxed, and cannot be lost in a market downturn. It's the only asset class that gets more valuable the more you use it. Consider what this means concretely. A person who can diagnose and fix a car problem is holding a skill asset worth on average $847 per year in avoided repair costs, according to AAA's annual vehicle maintenance survey. A person who can handle basic plumbing, electrical troubleshooting, appliance repair, and home maintenance holds a skill portfolio worth an estimated $2,200 to $3,800 per year in the American housing market. These are not speculative returns. They are recurring, guaranteed, tax-free withdrawals from a competence account you build once and draw from indefinitely. And unlike every other asset class you own, the value of this account increases, not decreases, when the economy contracts and professional service costs rise.
The philosophical shift that makes this rule actionable is treating every new skill you acquire, every problem you solve for the first time, every repair you complete with your own hands in an afternoon as a deposit into this account. The discomfort of the learning process is not a cost, it is an investment. And the return begins the next time you face the same problem, and your brain does not generate the dread signal because your competence account already holds the answer. If you continue treating money as the only measure of financial health, you will remain perpetually dependent on people who have already made the investment in competence you have been avoiding, and you will pay them indefinitely for that privilege. Knowledge without a timeline is a comfort story. You now understand the psychology, the mechanisms, the financial data, and the rules, and none of it produces a single dollar of return until you convert it into a sequence of specific actions, beginning this week, building through this month and this quarter, and arriving somewhere meaningfully different by the end of this year. Here is how that sequence works, built from the smallest possible first step to a complete financial system. This week. You start this week with a single act of observation. You walk through your home, your vehicle, and your regular financial life, and you write down every recurring cost that involves someone else solving a problem for you. Every subscription, every service call,
every maintenance contract, every outsourced task, no matter how small. You are not making any decisions yet. You are simply building visibility where there was invisibility before. What you will discover in this audit, if you are honest and thorough, is that between 30 and 50% of the items on that list involve a problem you could learn to handle yourself with a realistic investment of time at a realistic level of quality. That recognition is the reframe. Once you see the list, you cannot unsee it, and you cannot unknow what it is costing you. This month, you choose one item from that list, the one with the highest cost, the most frequent recurrence, or the shortest estimated learning curve, and you run the full problem response protocol on it for the first time. You audit it, research it, watch the tutorial, price the parts, and make a deliberate decision about whether to do it yourself or outsource it with full information. Whether you complete the repair or not is secondary. What matters is that you run the process and build the habit of deliberate comparison before spending. Repeat this with one new item each week for the rest of the month. By the end of 4 weeks, the protocol will feel less like a procedure and more like a reflex. This quarter, you build the systems that make resourcefulness automatic. You create your maintenance calendar, the full, scheduled, costed version for every system in your home and your vehicle. You set up the reminders, you attach the estimated costs, you convert your reactive repair budget into a proactive maintenance budget. You designate 1 day per month as a maintenance day, a fixed appointment with the systems in your life that you honor the same way you honor any professional obligation. By the end of the quarter, you are no longer in a purely reactive financial posture. You have a structure that generates early warnings, reduces crisis spending, and removes the emotional urgency that drives the most expensive decisions you make. By the end of this year, you are building something larger than a set of skills or a calendar. You are building a financial identity, a consistent self-concept as someone who understands their life, engages with their problems before outsourcing them, and treats competence as an asset worth growing. Set a specific financial target for what you want your competence account to return, a number in dollars that represents what you will save this year by applying the psychology in this video to real decisions in your real life. Research consistently shows that people who attach a specific financial target to a behavioral change sustain that change at rates 3 times higher than people who pursue the change as a general goal. Your target makes the philosophy concrete, and concrete goals produce measurable outcomes. You now have a roadmap from observation to identity, and every step on that roadmap builds on the one before it. Go back to that Tuesday night at the beginning of this video. The refrigerator that stopped working, the sink that started leaking, the car that made the unfamiliar sound on the way to work Monday morning. You were standing in 3 different rooms with the same feeling in your chest, that low, quiet dread of an unplanned cost arriving at the worst possible moment. The reason that feeling exists is not because the problems were too hard. It is because you had been trained by decades of consumer culture and social categorization to treat those problems as outside your domain before you had ever tried to enter it. The feeling was not a signal about your capability. It was a signal about your programming. You now understand what that programming has been costing you in specific dollar amounts, recurring annually, compounding over time. You understand the human architecture that separates the people who fix things from the people who call, and you understand that the architecture is not a gift of personality. It is a structure you can build, one deliberate decision at a time, beginning with the next problem that appears in your life. Here is what that means in practice, because there are exactly 2 directions this knowledge can take you. The first is the virtuous cycle. You choose the process question over the verdict question. You run the audit before you call. You complete one repair you would previously have outsourced. Your brain updates its model of what you are capable of. The next problem arrives with less dread than the last, and the cycle tightens. Your competence account grows. Your reactive spending falls. Your financial confidence rises independent of your income. The decisions get easier, not harder, and the results compound in your favor. The second is the destructive cycle. You find the ideas in this video interesting. You feel briefly motivated. You return to your existing habits at the next problem that appears. You outsource the decision. You pay the cost, and the cycle tightens in the opposite direction. Your dependence on external expertise deepens. Your anxiety about problems you do not understand grows. Your reactive spending remains a recurring drain on a budget that never quite catches up with your intentions. Research on financial behavior change published in the American Economic Review found that the single strongest predictor of which cycle a person enters after exposure to new financial information is not their income level, but their willingness to take a single micro action within 48 hours.